Well, thanks everyone for joining. We know each other in this space, so we want to make sure we all know who's here. But first of all, I just want to thank you all and welcome you to our salon. I'm part of the Institute of Impossible Subjects, and every once in a while we organize what we call these salons, where we just bring together a small group of folks who have an intimate dialogue around something that is related to migratory times, themes that are related to migratory times. The Institute of Impossible Subjects is a feminist collective, and we do pedagogical events, research, as well as we're working on publications. And so we are almost there with publishing our website, which will be a multimedia and interactive platform that we will invite all of you back because you participated in our different activities. We'll invite you back to participate in the website. And for today, though, we are doing the Salon with the Institute of Impossible Subjects, which is called Silhouettes, Migration, Undocumented, and Pedagogies. And here we have in this group, we have Crystal Bake, Dalita Maria Benfield joining in by phone, and who will be joining by video soon. We also have Ruby Chacon, Jose Manuel Cortez, Cindy Cruz, myself, Annie Isabel Fukushima, Sarita Gaitan, Juan Adera. And so I'm actually going to just have us, before we get officially started with the reading and the discussion together, is I would love if we could just go around and introduce ourselves. And so we'll start with the folks who are on camera. So we'll go Cindy, Ruby, Crystal, Juan, and then I'll direct who's next. And I won't forget the phone person, Dalita. But so Cindy, Ruby, Crystal Bake. And so if, Crystal, Juan, if you can just introduce yourself, say where you're coming from, and then if there's anything that you want to say about why immigration matters to you, we'd love to hear about that. And so I'm just going to do a quick go around.
Hi, everybody. It's so great to meet and see new faces. My name is Ruby Chacon. I'm originally from Salt Lake City, Utah, and I live in Sacramento. I'm an artist, muralist. I'm also the co-founder of Mestizo Institute of Culture and Art in Salt Lake City, which I still sit on the board for. And a lot of my work, I guess, centers around social issues, social justice, and bringing visible, kind of representing marginalized communities. Just through my own experience, the reason why immigration matters is because racism and discrimination is a repeated pattern, which I see in my own family, and it still exists today with current immigrants. And so I like to use a lot of retelling and reshaping stories through images and in murals and paintings. I guess that's kind of in a nutshell who I am.
Yeah. Okay, hi everyone. It's so nice to meet and see all of your beautiful faces this morning. I'm actually calling in from Los Angeles. I teach at UC Riverside, but commute there from LA. So I want to thank Annie for organizing this. I'm always so inspired by just all of the activities that she is organizing in the Institute. So really thankful for this space. So I think there are a lot of reasons why immigration and this discussion is so important to me. And besides for the personal experiences, I work with a lot of immigrant students. So for folks who don't know the demographics of UC Riverside, let's say 70 to 80 students, 70% to 80% of the students are first gen, a lot of students of color, a lot of undocumented students as well. In all of my classes I've taught, I've always had a handful of undocumented students in that classroom, and we've always had sort of these discussions around, on the one hand, how do we sort of mobilize the current tools that are available to us, political, cultural, and so forth on, in regards to sort of maintaining safety for themselves and their families, but also thinking about some of the more radical critiques around the nation state and even the notion of citizenship. So thinking about those issues have been really important to me. I also work pretty closely to the Cambodian community here in LA, especially in Long Beach. I'm a board member of Khmer Girls in Action. So really, that's a community that's been really heavily impacted, obviously, by different kinds of intersecting immigration issues. So I'm really excited to be participating in what I hope will be the beginning point of different kinds of conversations that we might be having.
Hi everyone, my name is Mera, and I also am in Los Angeles, and I teach at UCLA, and my personal connection to migration is I'm migrating myself, and so it's something that touches myself and my family and just basically every aspect of me. I do research with undocumented immigrants. One of the projects is with undocumented day laborers. But I'm always really interested in having these kinds of discussions that to think critically also about our role as academics in issues of migration and how we can support students, but also the communities that we work with. Okay.
Hi, everyone, and thanks to Annie for organizing this salon, and it's really great to hear your voices. I'm Dalida Maria Benfield. I'm an artist and ethnic studies scholar, and my research and writing is on contemporary artists who engage spaces of migration and displacement as actually a place from which new forms of expression, new forms of visual languages, and new epistemologies or ways of knowing emerges. And with Annie, I've been working through this platform, the idea of the Institute of Impossible Subjects, which Impossible Subjects is the title of May Nye's book that traces the kind of shifting lines of political subjectivity experienced by Asian Americans over the 20th century. And so this idea of the impossible subject is really at the core of what the Institute is focused on, which is creating spaces in which all of us who are impossible subjects can share our experiences and also create opportunities for people outside of academic institutions to engage in knowledge production and sharing together collectively. So anyway, so I'll stop there, and I'm just really excited for this discussion.
Hi, I'm Steve Cruz. I'm an associate professor at UC Santa Cruz in the Department of Education. I work with youth, homeless, queer youth in Los Angeles, California. I've only recently begun to think about migration or movement with the subjects that I work with. Now with UC Santa Cruz, we have 43% first generation Latino students here. And so migration and movement and mobility is just like these major themes that are emerging in this new data that I've collected. So part of that, I think, is I want to rethink homelessness as forced migration. I want to think about the migration that happens after young people cross multiple borders to come back to the U.S. after deportation. And I wanted to think about with others, because I feel like I'm in crazy town. And I wanted to think about like the role of technology and all these kinds of. I think about Lugones when she talks about survival, and and all these kinds of technologies that young people are accessing in order to make it survive in Los Angeles. And so I kind of think, like, I want to think about migration as movement, but maybe a forced movement, and even a forced movement within certain really small towns, do like in California or within Los Angeles. And so that's kind of where I am right now. I have lots of questions. Would love to talk to people. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
Hi, Sarita Gaitan, University of Utah, Department of Sociology and Gender Studies. I would say, kind of on a personal level, as the daughter of immigrants who had two very different immigration stories, one from South America and the other from Europe, I feel very much kind of at the crossroads of knowing the different types of politics that play out on people's lived experiences in the United States, having a father who came undocumented and a mother who arrived with documentation. Just being part of that that lived experience, I think, has kind of really, I don't know, just kind of fueled the way I see the world and understand and try to relate to, my students, many of whom at the University of Utah are both first generation, also born to immigrant parents, and a great deal of whom are undocumented today. I would say, with regard to my research, I am very much interested in questions around the nation, and more so, less with regard to people's experiences, but more in terms of objects and things, and how ideas around illegality travel through commodities. And my first project was around the travels of tequila through the United States and Mexico, beginning through the project of colonialization, and then its kind of border crossings into the American imaginary. Some new projects are thinking about these through the new passage of mezcal into the United States, this kind of baby of craft imaginaries in this kind of like optic of whiteness, right? This kind of reclaiming of a different type of kind of consumption of Mexican identity, and how this really does kind of get depoliticized from how people understand Mexican experience in the United States, but also in Mexico, and this kind of fetishization of poverty. So thinking again through the movement of commodities as migratory objects.
Hi, my name is Jose Cortez. I'm a first-year assistant professor here at the University of Utah. So thank you to Annie and the rest of you for having me. I'm so excited to join you. I'm very happy and look forward to continuing interdisciplinary collaborations. I'm interested in migration personally because I'm the son of a migrant, first-generation Mexican-American, and I've always been interested in the concept of impossibility because I had asked my parents growing up why we never really had any written documentation in terms of genealogy. And I think when there's this idea of forced migration being floated around, that when folks flee, that is not something that's not a technological privilege that follows forced migration sometimes. So I've always been interested in the possibilities for signification, or maybe the impossibilities for signification in migratory experiences. And professionally, I'm interested in looking at impossibility as a concept for thinking the limits of critical thought in tracking migratory patterns. So I'm just interested in looking at some nonfiction accounts at the moment, like Luis Alberto Urrea's The Devil's Highway, and another nonfiction book called The Beast, in which we're asking critical questions about what are the possibilities for folks who may be completely politically unintelligible to tell stories and to signify. And what that tells us as academics who and allows us to question our role in telling our stories and collaborating with these folks and the impossibilities therein. And whether or not it is possible for us to not continue to reproduce the conditions that, in critical thought that establish the patterns for these forced migrations. So what are the possibilities for acting outside of these patterns of capital and globalization that could think about migration otherwise, if that makes sense?
I'll introduce myself too. My name is Annie Isabel Fukushima, and I think I know everyone in different contexts here, but to introduce myself too, my work, I look at Asian and Latino migrants that are trafficked in the United States. And so I've been deeply interested in how we witness violence and migration, and in particular how we unsettle witnessing, because the forms of witnessing that currently dominate the ways that we see, experience around legality, citizenship, and victimhood have been defined by these normative frames. And so that's something that I've been working on for quite some time. I also am been interested in theories of social death. And so I am presenting a paper on zombie pedagogies, which I'm really excited about. And so, yay! I'm just so excited to see you all here, and we're going to go ahead and get started with reading and listening to a poem together, have a conversation around that, and then Ruby's going to walk us through her work, in which we will look then at her work and then have conversations around that. And then if we want to continue to have conversations around other things, we can. Here we have, we've already introduced ourselves, and now we're going to listen to Sonia Ginyansaka's poem, Bursting of Photographs, after trying to squeeze out old memories. And she herself is a undocumented individual. She might have received documentation in the past couple of years, but when I first saw her article was in 2015, in which she's Ecuadorian and who lives in Harlem, and she's a poet. And so I thought it would be lovely to start with sound and poetry together, so we could have something that we are thinking through together.
Bursting of photographs after trying to squeeze out old memories. They don't tell you this when you migrate. Old Polaroids are never enough. You're left tracing the silhouettes of your grandparents or whatever's left of them. How many years has it been? 5, 10, or 20? It's been 20. 20. In those 20 years, you have been asked to hide your accent. Sew your tongue so that no more R's roll out. Straighten up so that white Jesus accepts you, so that lawyers help you. Dig out the roots of your home from underneath your nails. Cut your trenza. Pledge allegiance to the flag. And when you cannot, each thread will cut through every inch of you to teach you your kind was not meant for this country. Dad told you that they will measure your success based on how smart you could be, so you tried to be smart. Books after books, you chased vocabulary for value, legislation to give you meaning. Yes, sir, I am a skilled worker. Yes, sir, I can contribute. No, sir, I haven't committed any crimes. Pinned against one another, you remember that your mother almost didn't make it through the border, or any legislation this time around. She won't make it into healthcare packages. She won't be remembered during press conferences. She will be dissected and research and research and research and research and research about how much she doesn't belong will be published. They don't tell you this when you migrate.
So I just love if we could just have a conversation about this poem, and then we'll just spend some time thinking about this poem together. And so I just wanted to invite anybody who would love to respond to the to Sonia's work.
I mean, I really loved how the poem, I was listening to it earlier this morning too, in terms of, it's a conversation I've had with a lot of my students about, what is the meaning of documentation? I mean, what does that mean in terms of both the kind of and Annie, you were gesturing to this in your intro too, sort of the more official sort of nation state forms of documentation, and then alternative forms of documentation in terms of, when we think about documents about traces or some sort of evidential traits. And I think the poem really reminds me of the necessity to sort of think about alternative forms of documentation in terms of lived experiences. I love sort of the sonic traits of the poem, which I thought was really powerful, and also thinking about she sort of gestures to images, right, and photography. So it's something that I've been thinking a lot about with my students, and also in terms of even pedagogically, how do we sort of create different pathways for students to think about alternative forms of documentation, right, as both sort of an imaginative act, but also as kind of a testament to their own experiences, right, and how it doesn't align with sort of how the nation state thinks about documentation. So I've been thinking a lot about that, and that was really powerful for me.
I love the poem. It's so nice to give that to students in these times, I think. But when I heard it, the research at the end, I was like, oh yeah, I can see that. But I think what is hard to research is what I like in the poem is maybe some bodies are never going to be assimilated, and that assimilation is also a part of this documentation. And then there's some bodies that are, either refused or you're unable, no matter what the nation state wants to do, you can't, that there are some things where you refuse assimilation or you're unable to do, I don't know how to say that, but this kind of refusal of it, or some bodies just aren't going to be put into this thing, whatever documentation is or citizenship is in the U.S. That I love that refusal. It's my accent too much. Yes, I'm a skilled worker. Yes, I'm all these things. And yet I can't help but think no matter how many answers that you give to research or to Homeland Security, in their eyes, that some people are never going to be assimilatable to the U.S.
I really like that. That resonated with me as well. I think that part of the promise of the American fantasy of national, part of the progress, I don't know, of the fantasy of American national belonging is that the nation will accept you. And I think part of what happens and part of what's becoming more and more, I think has been evident for a lot of people for a long time, is this moment of realization that the nation does not want to accept you. And what do you do at that moment? Your dad will tell you, right? Your dad will tell you, where is it? In this poem, Dad told you that they will measure your success based on how smart you could be, so you tried to be smart. Even your dad is going to believe in that American promise and hold out for that fiction. But there's a moment of rupture. There's a moment of rupture for some people where they realize that they're never going to belong. There's no point of assimilation. There's no point of carryover where the national symbolic is going to incorporate them and they're going to be part of this American success story. And I'm going to leave it at that.
The moment in the poem where she's saying, yes, sir, I'm a skilled worker. Yes, sir, I can contribute. No, sir, I haven't committed any crimes. Making me think about this idea that what if we were to consider the border as a threshold not designed to keep people out, but to force people through as specific kinds of subjects, as wage laborers, as a form of production, and a specific kind of value that the border produces, in this form of belonging that doesn't belong. So we want the good migrant, we don't want the bad migrant, but there's some kind of tension there that I haven't really teased out that is pointing me to in this belonging but not belonging and being forced through the border. So I don't know.
I think for me, it makes me, what you were just saying, Jose, makes me think about something that I've been thinking through, which is the how migrants are bound to be seeing in the, and not just migrants, all of us, right? We're bound to being seen in these dualities around citizenship, which then means non-citizenship, legality, which then reifies illegality, victims and criminals, and we're always bound to seeing migrants in this way. And I think that this poem is really speaking to that. And I also resonated with the research part, because then I think that as a scholar, when she was research echoing that, Cindy, when you were emphasizing that, I think for me, it makes me think about what is our responsibility as I identify as a scholar activist. And so being a scholar activist, how do I continue to participate in forms of witnessing that don't then reproduce this person who feels like they're always going to be an object of study, but that there can be and so in a way it can feel paralyzing, right? So there's huge responsibility to the kind of research that we do, that she's calling us out on, right? Saying that, and I think it's an important thing to think about, especially being here in the institution. I'm sitting in the University of Utah. I'm sitting in an institution that researches migrants, says that that Utah is welcoming to migrants, and yet there's this contradiction around these centers that come up. We have different centers that come up that study migrants, but we also have massive deportation happening. We also have incarcerations happening. And so then, so I really, this poem spoke to me as well.
And I mean, that's, in this space and hopefully in other conversations that we'll be having, I mean, I'm really interested in thinking about that. I mean, just what you just said, what others were echoing in terms of like research and scholarship as, and I think all of us have sort of personal ties to migration or immigration, but also are in fairly privileged, positions, right? So thinking about different ways of strategizing together of how to really support as teachers and documented students, not just as sort of objects of study, right, obviously, but also in terms of what are different ways of really supporting, facilitating their own research, right, and sort of finding different venues and different strategies of doing that. I mean, something that I've been thinking about a lot in relationship with my grad students as well. So I would love to sort of hear about the kind of work that you guys are doing in that vein too.
When you said that, Crystal, I was just thinking how I can't wait to play this to begin my class when I talk about DACA, and immigration. And I teach education classes. So sometimes they feel kind of far away from these issues. But, last year, I was just thinking like how important it was to bring the arts into our classes like this. And I know at UC Santa Cruz, I don't think students get enough of the arts, or that things are so siloed off that they're not able to kind of, it's as if we don't really even hear what's happening in the arts department until like after it's done. But I think about like to bring in Ruby's paintings to show undergraduates while I'm thinking about DACA students, to bring in like start the class with poems, pedagogically, I think, because so much research isn't going to get at this unassimilationable kind of body or this feeling or research, and I think how important it is for us to do this kind of interdisciplinary kinds of teaching and to draw from these, especially artists. I just feel like art has been foreclosed, in particular in California. When you're a high school student, you don't get any art. And if you're at the UC, unless you're an art student, you're not really going to get any art either, or poetry, or anything visual. Unless you go to a small private liberal arts college where you're lucky to have a couple of faculty of color, And so when I think about like the importance of this kind of, creative work, this is, I think, like pedagogically, this is where I think, like, maybe this is the place where those kinds of really kind of interesting and engaged discussions can happen with our students. Last year, I had taught an advanced foundation class for my PhD students, and I ended the class with, it was really intense, and I ended the class with Tim Z. Hernandez's "All They Will Call You." And so I started the class with the Woody Guthrie song where that book comes from. And it was really moving because it reminded students, like, why are we here doing this PhD? And to remind students, like the urgency of the kind of work that so many of them are doing here at UC Santa Cruz, looking at migrant families, looking at migrant students, looking at this process. Half my students are doing projects like that. And so, like, ending the class with Tim Z. Hernandez's book was just like, oh, like, what a breath of fresh air to kind of bring the arts in to these, I have to say, kind of dry social science kinds of classes, and to give that to them, to expand their world, because like our research doesn't really get at that, but literature does, and poetry does, and art does, especially one's paintings like yours, Ruby. Like, I've always admired your work since I heard about it years ago, and I just love, like, I have to give those to my undergrads. I have to give it to my grad students and ask for them to kind of like move in these other circles that maybe they're not so accompanied, used to, but that, like, this is the space, like, we have to find some way to bridge that pedagogically. It's so nice to hear that poem. You forget,
Did Juan or Dalita, who's on the phone still, or actually looks like she might be joining by video, but Juan or Dalita want to say anything, or?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what people have been saying, just because I feel like as a dry social scientist, I sometimes forget about the arts, right, or in my own life, just because I'm not really into poetry, so it's like it's a while to really appreciate it. So I love hearing you all like think through it, right? I realized how important it is, especially like not just like pedagogically to get different kinds of media that are used, but also just like to keep people entertained, especially undergrads, right? I always forget that part of this teaching process is also about making learning fun, right? And making learning engaging for like 18, 19, 20-year-olds, right? Yes, of course, how powerful poetry is and other forms of art. And it's just a reminder to me to incorporate it much more.
Yay! Yeah, it's great to see you. It's great to see everyone's faces, and it's been really nice to listen to you through the phone also. I want to say two things about the poem. One is just the idea of silhouettes, or the image of silhouettes is so, it's just so powerful, and I feel like it opens up so many different pathways for thinking together about visibility and invisibility. And how we also in the image, the idea too of the shadow is really powerful. And I think one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is the idea of ancestralities and how we claim our ancestral ways, how we claim our ancestors, how we support each other or create situations, create social conditions in which we can claim our ancestors. And then another thing, I just want to echo what everyone is saying about the power of diverse forms of communication. I think the arts is one way to say that. And maybe another way to say it is just that, we have many, many ways that we can communicate with each other. And the kind of academic forms of the book and writing, these are forms that have exercised a coloniality, colonizing of our sense of what is official knowledge. And so for me, one of the ways of thinking about a decolonial sociality is to also think about a diversity of forms of communication, which also are just, they open up so many ways of feeling, and which are very nourishing, for us and for our imaginations. So.
Wow. Did anyone? Yeah, go ahead. No. I was like, did anyone else want to say anything? I'm sorry. I'm checking time because I want to make sure we get to Ruby's work, and I don't want us to run out of time and not see visuals together. So, did anyone before we get to Ruby's work, did you want to add anything else? Do you feel like there's something that has not been placed on the table? Yeah, Ruby, would you love to say anything?
Something small because I had problems with my headphones. I got booted off the phone call, and so I was trying to get my sound, and so I couldn't hear. I didn't hear the poem, but I remember I listened to it when you first sent it. So I'm trying to grasp on to what it had said through what you all are saying, but. One thing that I remember, I don't remember the details of the poem, but what I do remember after I listened to that poem when you sent it the first time was how it resonated with me was that grasping of memories of self and who you are, and not exactly what Dalida talked about, being colonized and trying to decolonize through these memories, grasping onto these memories. I think I remember there was a part of was there a part with shoebox photos?
Yes.
Photos?
Yes.
Okay.
Photos.
Okay, so this is, I'm grasping from when you first sent it, and that resonated with me in my own work and grasping onto my own identity as I think this harsh reality of assimilation. Assimilation can feel so violent and colonizing, and it feels like it's a process to erase your identity and the identity of your parents and your grandparents, and these photos and the memories that she talks about in this poem just it resonated a lot with me in my own work and what I'm trying to grasp onto and trying to hold on to and preserve and reshape away from what we're told that we're supposed to be, which through assimilation. So I really appreciated the poem, and also what you all are saying about all forms of communication, including the art, that can grasp onto things that maybe other circles or other ways of knowing can't. But I think that they work together, that they intersect with each other and they communicate with each other. What you're doing in academia and universities, I think I learn a lot through just my own friends who are in those places, and it inspires me to do my work. It actually gives me a language sometimes to what I'm actually doing, because sometimes I don't even know, like I'm just feeling it in my body and I don't even know why I'm doing what I'm doing until I hear conversations like these or talk with people I know who are part of those institutions and they have to frame them in a language that is understandable to the institutions, right? But it also gives me a language. So I really, really appreciate that in this discussion based around arts and how your work, every one of your works intersects with that world, with the creative art world too.
Yeah. Oh, Thank you. And thanks for, I think it's nice to kind of come back to the title of the event, which is Silhouettes. And so imagining what are those shadows that migration casts, and that's being cast in the poem that's in our lives, in our memories. And I would love to use this as an opportunity, since you were talking about your own sort of inspirations, Ruby. If folks are okay, are we okay to move on to Ruby's work? Let's move on to Ruby's work.
Well, sure. Thank you actually for taking the time to even to look at the images. I appreciate everyone's time and effort to share this with me. I kind of had a hard time deciding on which images. I had a lot. So I did kind of span it from a time frame. So what we're going to look at, Annie asked me to do 2 different batches, 5 and 5. I did 5 and 6. And they stem from an earlier time. I think they're pretty chronological, the way we're going to look at them. And so they kind of hit on different time frames and experiences that were going on with me and in connection to what was going on in my surroundings in community, depending on when I painted them. So I guess we can look at them now if you would like. You have them in order, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and there we go.
Okay. So this one is on this part. This is self as undocumented. So this piece I did in 2006, and I started out by when I started out as an artist, I thought I was an immigrant. And until I graduated from college, I had some really, tragic events that happened in my family, in which I had a nephew that was murdered, and the papers wrote all these. My family, other extended family would come over and say, "Be careful, because the media is going to say what they want." And I didn't really understand it until it actually happened. And so I was about to graduate. I'm the first in my family to graduate from high school and the first to graduate from college. So at that point, I kind of made the decision that I had to use my art for something. And so I went to find out, first I wanted to find out where I came from, where in Mexico I thought we came from. And then when I went to go speak with my grandfather, who lived 5 hours away, I asked him where we came from in Mexico, and he said, he pretty much told me the border crossed us. And so I learned a little bit about our history and about how it impacted my family down there, how segregation impacted my father and my aunts. I didn't know about was my family's history, and what occurred to me is that is also part of Utah history that was erased from the history books, because there are a lot of amazing things that happened. And so when I painted this piece, it was kind of during the time when the Arizona bill was passed, and all those. Oh, is that you?
Yeah, that's me. Sorry, you're okay. I'm sorry.
Pushing up the volume?
Yeah.
I thought that was me. I thought my computer was turning up the volume, so I kind of got concerned. Okay, so it was really impactful to me, because I felt like a lot of the people that were being discriminated against, to me, they were my family. They were my community, and regardless of if they had papers or not, that same treatment, even though segregation is now against the law, the way my family was treated, we're now creating laws for a new demographic, which was the only thing that made us really different were the borders that were placed to divide us. And so I created this piece, and it was kind of an internal way of the way I felt in connection with the way people were being harmed around me, with my own history of feeling what happens for me, it was a play word, self as undocumented, being that my history is undocumented. Therefore, because my history was undocumented, I didn't find out until I was 27 years old that that I had history longer than the Mormon pioneers, although they had, I always felt like a second-class citizen growing up in Utah. So because of that change and because I didn't know, my family acted accordingly. And so we were pushed out of schools, and I became the first to graduate. And so that's my personal connection to it. And then it also reflected what was happening in the communities around me. And so I painted it in a way where I felt kind of like invisible, or felt like I was like the walking dead amongst the living. It was kind of the way you see it. I mean, that's kind of how I try to reflect how it felt inside to be from an invisible community. Although I recognize that I do have privileges that a lot of undocumented communities don't have. This was kind of my expression of the pain that unjust laws have on our community. So that's it. Okay, so it also, this piece is actually a piece I did for MOX when it was in Utah. I was part of the organizing committee, and these are all the women that were on that organizing committee also. And so my work reflects a lot of pain of what I see outside of me and inside of me, but it also is a tool that I use to create a counter narrative to that pain and to injustices. And so this painting this drawing is actually designed for a painting, and it reflects pretty much what you see in front of you, creating spaces of belonging, and also what MOX is all about. And so you have the women as a tree pulling up the little girl, creating the pathway for the next generation. Next. Okay, so this one is a little bit more recent. This is on a public utility box that I've designed here in Sacramento. And a lot of my pieces, when I do public art, I try to do a lot of stuff that reflect the surrounding communities. And each of these are different sides. They're laid out flat as one, but they're each one side. There's 4 sides. And each of them face a different direction, one representing elders, one representing women, one children, and one men. And then you have the butterflies. And so I titled this one, Immigration is Beautiful, with the butterflies coming in and out of their hands and their feet, and the movements that they create, and how they're linked by the butterflies. And so so when I do stuff for public art, I always try to do something that envisions something very, there's something echoing in my headphones. Okay. When I do stuff for the public, I try to do stuff that's very representative of them, but in a positive and beautiful way, if that makes sense. I don't have a language that comes to what I'm trying to say, but that's it. Next one.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are the very last 2 pieces that I've done for my latest series, and this one I'm collaborating with the research of Dr. Sonia Aleman and Lord Olivo, who have done a piece, which I should have written in front of me. It's a research around a student paper called Venceremos, and that started, I believe, in 1993, and then it went into hiatus for a little while, and then resurfaced in 2007. And there were all the editors from that point were Chicana women. They were the first Chicana women for that paper, and so that their research centers around that, and they found what moved that paper forward was this Aztec goddess Papalot, who is a jaguar butterfly. And so, so I collaborated with them in their research. Floyd is also a photographer, so she did photo shoots with all these women. And then I created pieces based on the articles that they wrote. This one is based on colorism. And so you can see the different shapes in her face. It also has a personal touch to the editor, to her, to this subject that's in the painting. That is represented by the pink roses and the saint, which I forgot her name. I should have written it. I have it written down somewhere because I spoke with her. But her mom has cancer, and so she prays to the saint, and she also loves pink roses. So that's kind of a personal touch to this person that I painted, and also images that represent some part of the article that she had written, and also she's an attorney, so I thought it very interesting to include something that represents justice, which was the Statue of Liberty, and also in its kind of like representation of, in each of these paintings I have representations of each papalot, and so you see the butterflies and the jaguar that's incorporated in the crown. That's kind of a representation, and also on the left side of her, those are also symbols of each papalot. And she is somebody who gives them. She's this force that gives you strength to keep doing forward in what you're doing, and so that's why those symbols are in there as well. So it's kind of a little bit layered. And then the next one is also part of the same series. The model here is a teacher, and she was interested in writing, or is interested in social justice books. So I collaged a lot of titles of books in here, and also I wanted to put in, if you can move a little bit to your right of her. Okay. A is for activists, is a children's book, and then I have actually children activists behind her because she teaches children. So it's kind of a representation of her. And she didn't do an article; she did poetry, but so this one is more of a representation of this person. And then I also have parts of each papalot that are kind of within the painting also. So there's that one.
Great. Did folks, Ruby provided us 5 more paintings, pictures of her paintings, but maybe, did anyone have questions? Maybe we can use this as an opportunity to ask questions, or if you wanted to go back to an image.
I actually would like to go back to that previous image.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so Sarita is interested in this one?
Yes.
Great.
And Ruby, you mentioned colorism. I was wondering if you could say a little more about that. So referring to
she's a light-skinned Latina, and so she did an article on how people, just depending on the color of your skin, and how when you move through different spaces, and how you're treated within your own community and within the white community, and just that experience. And so that's kind of what this is about. So I represented it with just the different shades within her face. I guess that's as simple as it is. I mean, that's kind of the gist of what it is. I have her article somewhere. If you want to read it, I can send it later.
Very cool. I mean, I feel like that's a big conversation that is in the Latino community. I feel like I only see it happening like on Facebook blurbs. It's nice to see that kind of visually represented in that art. And I was just wondering, like, if that were to be, published in an article, I was wondering if even that subtlety would be able to be captured like in a black and white article, right? Just thinking about, I don't know, just
as metaphor on many different levels. I think that's really, really beautiful.
Thank you. And I think these two last paintings, I think, are a good example on how important it is to kind of go back to our ancestral knowledge of being communal and collaboration. And so I don't think I could have done any of these pieces without the photographs with Flor, and also the knowledge that was behind the research, and also the knowledge that was behind the articles that each and every one of these women shared, and that I had read of theirs. So a lot of it, I have a lot of information before I start each of the pieces, and I have to figure out how each and every one of parts of, not all of the information, but the most important parts of all that information could be reflected in each of these pieces. And so a lot of times there's a lot, and sometimes I have to simplify it, but then also, even though right now it looks a little simplified, there's a lot of layers that came to create to this painting, if that makes sense.
Any other questions? I can't see you.
This is the first time I've talked about these pieces.
Oh, no, it's wonderful. Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments?
I was just going to say thank you for sharing the images. I love, you were just talking about layers. I love how layered, or the different layers of meanings that that have in your work, especially one of the last images that we just saw. I loved seeing the details and seeing all the little pieces of it. Especially like the one with the woman in the portrait, and sort of like all the tiny details is amazing.
Thank you. And in my very first piece too, I have the self is undocumented. We didn't go close to it. We didn't scan close.
Yeah,
I don't know what's wrong with me, but I'm really tongue twisted today. We didn't look at it up close, but you have a lot of circles. And I don't know what it is with that, but sometimes I just kind of, when you're in the process of creating, some of the stuff comes out intuitively, but there's something to do, like for me, this pattern started coming out after I took a visit, after I went to Mexico for the first time, and I went to the sacred sites and would see a lot of the circular patterns, and for me it kind of feels like that the circle is kind of like a completion of like a whole, like a cycle, like a it feels like it's something. It's a symbol that it means something to the ancestors and to myself. It like transfers onto me, but I don't have the language around it, but it feels like it's a symbol that needs to be part of these paintings. Like they're little cycles or completions, or like I'm not explaining it right, but something I'm glad it's like the circles just kind of call to me when I create some of the pieces, not all of them, but some of them, and I don't really know why. I just kind of like listen to it and I just kind of add it in there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Ruby, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Cindy. Go ahead, Cindy.
Are these really big? Like, are they big, like in scale? The paintings?
This particular piece, I don't have anymore, but it's kind of, yeah, this one's kind of big. I guess I can't remember. I should have put the dimensions. I've done so many pieces that I don't remember all the details. I can remember more. The current ones are 24 by 24. Yeah, those are, and those are, to me, those are like, they're probably medium size, right? And so the other one, self is undocumented, is larger than this one. I think it's 36 by 36. I'm not sure. I can't remember. I have to look. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Ruby, I was just going to ask you, well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your work. I really loved hearing you talk about it. And I actually wanted to go back to the portrait, the self as undocumented. And I think sort of your description of the circles and sort of the intuitive, sort of your intuition to use circles was really interesting. And wondering if you could talk about, when you're describing this piece, you were also talking about your family's history in relationship to Utah, sort of these histories of erasure. So I was thinking a lot about this notion of documentation and sort of for you, are there ways that this particular painting and sort of your other work, what are the different ways that this painting thinks through this notion of documentation, both in relation to your family's experience, your own experience, and do you think that your paintings and your work, are sort of alternative ways of documentation, especially when you're thinking about sort of these more formal histories that have been erased?
Mm-hmm. As far as this piece in particular is more of a healing, sort of painting for me. And I think the pieces that follow, when I create a counter narrative, because I think what I learned is my identity was informed by somebody else's story about me. And I saw how that happened in my family and how it tore them apart and how they didn't make it through school systems, and because they believed that they were criminals, or they believed that they were just, that they didn't belong in higher education. I didn't believe I belonged in higher education. I didn't even think that I could graduate high school because I didn't see that in my life. Like, I didn't see anybody that looked like me who could graduate high school. And the only reason why I did graduate was because my younger sister dropped out in 8th grade. And so my brother made me go to school. Like, he sat me down. He's like, "You're the last one." And I thought that I kept going, but I thought I wouldn't graduate because I had a high school counselor that consistently told me, and I found out later, many students of color, that we wouldn't graduate. So why? She told me, "Why are you graduating? I mean, why are you still here? You're not going to graduate anyway." And she would tell me on a consistent basis. So I would, every time she called me into her office, I would find ways to just like to block her voice out, because I didn't want to disappoint my family. But when I saw my name on the list of seniors who were going to graduate, I thought they made a mistake, and I didn't want to tell my counselor because I really believed her. I thought I wasn't graduating. I just kept going because my family counted on me. And so the only reason I went to college is because when I graduated high school, I moved away with one of my best friends who had the same counselor, and she was also Latina. And I found out years later that she told her the same thing. And I went and moved to Santa Barbara with her, and it was the first time I had a Chicano counselor. And I just remember I was terrified of counselors, and I did not want to go see him. And I just remember sitting down in his office as he was going to try to help me with my classes. And he called me, and he did all that. And I kept waiting for him to tell me I couldn't do it. So why am I trying? I kept waiting for that to happen. And then he called me in the middle of the semester, and I thought, okay, here it comes. He's going to tell me. And then he's like, "I checked up on you because I had 2 jobs, and I was going to school full time. And so I thought he was going to tell me, that's too much, you're not going to be able to do it. And so he sat me down, he's like, I checked on your classes, you're doing really well, and I'm really proud of you. And I just remember feeling surprised. And then and I saw students of color on campus, and that was the first time where I realized images were really important. What I saw impacted me on so many levels that it really set me to on my path to actually get a degree. So yes, I think that images are really important in telling your story and making your story visible. I don't necessarily do a lot of. I do like to do kind of like a juxtaposition of social justice issues with with the counter narrative to injustices, because I kind of just feel like if you can't just have the injustices, you have to have a vision for justice, you know? So that's why I do a lot of my public art with images that are uplifting and about the communities that they reflect. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it doesn't.
Great. I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent to give you a little context. But
That was so
that's
beautiful.
really great.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Go ahead. No? Oh no, that was, thanks, Ruby.
Yeah, I just wanted to share about,
No, go ahead.
okay. Yeah, thanks so much, Ruby. This is so wonderful to see this work. And each piece is so different too. So there's so much to talk about and to think through. But one thing I'm thinking about just looking at the self as undocumented piece is how it's just like the labor of the circles. I mean, because I just look at this and I just think about so much work, you know, the hours, you know, that you put into, you know, making these, making the circles and then layering it and like just to get the light like that. I mean, to just kind of like pull this shape, right? Together.
yeah.
Out of like
when you're creating, time doesn't exist.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
Oh, I said, when you're creating, time doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and I feel like that's that actually gets right to what I was thinking, because it's like it's like the labor of creating the painting. It's like that's in total distinction, or it's like a contrary statement to the idea of being documented. Mm-hmm. It's just like, it's the document, the idea of documentation seems so meaningless, or just like trite, you know, in comparison to this like very elemental and beautiful labor, you know, of the image, and also of existence, you know, of your existence. Like the statement of your existence is so much bigger and so much more meaningful than the idea of being documented. So, yeah, it's really powerful.
I'm just listening, I don't know what to say. Well, I think what people get when they see my work is that they have a sense of belonging. When they see my work and they look at it, they think, yes, I belong here. This image is almost like is creating an environment that makes me feel like this is my space too. It's creating space. For me, it creates space for myself. I already do that for myself, but I wanted to create space for other people that like what Malks is, creating space, and probably other spaces, but I don't have a lot of experience in other spaces, but redefining, reshaping space so people feel like they are a part of, rather than living in the margins all the time, if that makes sense.
I'm really, I love the self-undocumented. I was curious about the lines that go across the face. I wanted to say if it was about, about the fragment itself. But then I was thinking maybe it's a map, I was thinking maybe it's a map.
The way I was feeling it was, however you interpret it, I think every interpretation is right, because everybody comes with their own experiences. But the way I was feeling it was this feeling of being invisible and dead, like The Walking Dead, like dead, like, and so it's kind of like a cracked skull sort of thing, that's kind of what I was thinking at the time. But it can also be a map. We could reshape it into yeah.
Well, I love the story that you told that your family's been here pre-Utah, before these Utah settlers have come. Our family has a similar history. Like, we've been in Los Angeles since before LA was LA, and I love looking at, like, when you walk around Los Angeles, especially downtown LA, you bump into all these little pieces of public art. I think it's called The Power of Place. And I'm trying to remember someone wrote about it. Oh, I cannot remember the name. But I love, I felt like the public art was giving me, this map of LA, and I feel like when I see your work, there's also a similar kind of mapping of things. And I totally appreciate that. I love the work of that. Like the image of the teacher with all the books behind her. And I was thinking about literacy, and I love that image too, And I felt like, well, here's a mapping of someone's look like someone's working with little kids, because I saw one in the background. There's a Malcolm X, right? And I was looking at some of the books that are there, and I just love that, because here's these little kids, same DACA, what does Freddie talk about? Like it is about this kind of praxis, right? And so I feel like I'm watching your paintings turn into that, it's kind of reflecting a praxis there. And maybe your praxis is about your family history, our political era. All these
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
Okay, so imagine walking through LA and none of those murals are there anymore. Imagine none of these books are there. Imagine a world where it's all absent, it's all invisible. How did that impact you? How did that impact you? That's what this is what I'm trying to do with my work, because like I said, when I was growing up, I didn't see people like me graduate high school. It seems so simple. I didn't see people run for office. There are people now. It's changed a lot. But when I was growing up, I didn't have any teachers of color, and I had one Chicano. At the University of Utah, I had one Chicano studies class, so I had one person of color. But and it's changed a lot now. But imagine all the art; they're all white. Every image that you see does not reflect you. Every story that you read about does not reflect you. Every teacher or every person in every professional field does not reflect you. What does that tell you? So that's why this is kind of my resistance, my counter narrative to that. How do I carve space for people who feel like who feel like the self-undocumented paintings, and create this space and say, you belong here. This is your space. This is, our community. We do exist and we do belong. It's about creating spaces of belonging for me.
I love that. I guess I'm really taken by public art. When I was in Mexico City, my partner and I got a chance to go down to Cuernavaca to see the big mural, and I was thinking about the pedagogical kind of power of providing an alternative, history. It's the only time maybe you ever get to see those is in art and or murals. And so I feel kind of very similar to your work. Like I just love looking at these alternative things, the reading, the literature, teachers who are doing something much different than what the Common Core is asking us, or what other kinds of national kind of standards of what's considered knowledge and what isn't.